Everyone's failed shot back in their video, and a while back I made a video on every character and what I would use in regards to gear sets on them. And today I am updating that with an additional spreadsheet and talking about how to gear and what substats and main stats to prioritize on every single character. So let's jump into it. So we're here on the XP Jelly calculator, and I figure I show this to everyone because it seems like it's difficult to find. But we're going to go ahead and go to the bottom, and you're going to see here you're going to have the Ace Champion gear sets and then the Ace Champion stats. And this is how you're going to pull up the entire sheet. Now, there's a couple things I wanted to just go over really quickly before we kind of talk about some certain characters and why I prioritize the stats that I would. First thing is, the way I kind of went about deciding what stats to prioritize in regards to the characters that we're using is, one, it's going to be a very, very general list. So PvP and PvE are included, but generally PvE weights a little higher for me overall, just because you cannot compete in PvP content unless you are completing most of the PvE content in the game. So that's definitely a priority. Not to mention, speed is rated a little bit differently here because obviously, speed is necessary for certain speed tunes like the Ice Wolf comp, or perhaps some Queen 14, Ash 14, all sorts of different dungeons and teams need certain speed tuning, but it's not necessarily inherently important to the character itself. One good example here is Brand, for example. You obviously really want him to go first every single time, so speed is something I would recommend. But then you have someone like, let's just, for example, say Evra right here. Where is she? She's right here. You can see I have attack percentage for the boots, but you actually want to run speed boots on her if you're running her with Brand and something like Void Tower. So obviously that's going to change based on all the different comps in the game. The third thing here is going to be that I generally weight crit damage higher than attack percentage, and this is just because crit damage is a little bit more valuable than attack percentage for most characters. You could have some examples here, and I did change it for those specific examples, but crit damage generally gives you more damage than attack percentage. And then the fourth thing is focus. I guess it kind of goes together, focus and resistance. There is an inherent need for focus on a lot of different characters, meaning that you need them to provide the role, you need focus to provide the role that they're actually being used for, but it's a soft cap. For example, a good example of this would be Desmond here. Desmond really only needs about, if you're using him in Void Tower or if you're using him in dungeons, you only need about 80-90% focus. For this Void Tower rotation, it's a little bit different. But generally, there's a soft cap to focus, depending on what content you're using them in. And then also the same with resistance. You don't need a ton of resistance in Void Tower, but you may want, 150, 160% resistance if you're using them in Arena. And the last one, agility and precision. Agility does have a little bit more weight in PvE content than resistance, for my opinion. I've found that agility has a lot more uses. And precision is mainly a arena stat. You really don't necessarily need it for a lot of different characters. It's helpful to limit the amount of times you're running in Void Tower, and also it helps the fact that you can run campaign squads much quicker because they won't get deflected as often. But generally, that's going to how it breaks down in regards to the stats that I'm prioritizing. Also, one other thing is that health percentage is oftentimes used as the default for tankier characters. Now, obviously, there's some exceptions, which is Mythasia and Blackburn. They want an HP percent because it increases their healing. But like just a standard tankier character, let's see if I can find one here. Something like, I don't know. Let's see if we can find one. William. William's a great example. As you can see, he's speed, HP. Defense is absolutely viable here if they don't have like HP scaling. The reason why I say HP is because generally you're going to be running Hackrin with a lot of these characters, and if you're running Hackrin, I think HP is just inherently more valuable. But if you're not, running a mix of HP and defense is very, very viable. In fact, probably even better. So that pretty much breaks down how and why I rated the stats the way I did. I just want to go over a couple of examples of just standard tank, standard support, standard damage dealer, and standard buffer. So first one is a good example. We have Brand here, and I actually have HP percent and health percent, but let's do that real quick. But you can see he's got speed, on the boots. These are all main stats, by the way. Boots, ring, and amulet just represent the main stat, and then the substats are the substats you'd want to prioritize. Some of them have a black mark here, which means I literally don't think that the next substat you could prioritize is almost not valuable at all. Very, very little difference. And obviously, you're going to want these top 4 before you get to the 5 and 6, and some of them have caps as well. But for brand here, we have speed, HP. Obviously, we're going to be running HP on brand because he's going to increase his shield. Speed for the buffer. Any buffer that you have is going to want those speed boots. You're going to want to prioritize speed as the substat to make sure they're going first in every situation. Obviously, because he's brand, you're going to want that HP on that second prioritization of substats. And then you're going to want focus here as the third prioritization because you want attack down to land and you want that taunt to land. And then we get to the more niche stats like defense percentage, agility, and resistance. This is very standard for all of my characters here. Usually agility and resistance take the 5 and 6 substat slots because they're very, very good. But you don't need agility generally in PvE content. You don't need resistance generally. You don't need a lot of defense percentage generally. Those are mainly arena stats. Obviously, you're going to want to stack as much tankiness, as much agility, as much resistance as you can in arena for that to be valuable. And then we can go over someone like a healer here. These max HP healers are very basic. You're just going to prioritize HP and then defense to make them tanky. And then you actually don't really care about speed a lot of the times. Sometimes some dungeons require speed, but oftentimes they can kind of just scoot in at the last slot behind the enemies going so they can heal off the end of that round. So agility and resistance are prioritized a little bit higher there. And then we have a standard damage dealer here with Cyrus. She's going to want to go attack, crit damage, or crit rate ring, and then attack on the amulet. Obviously, you can run speed boots on these damage dealers depending on where you're running them. But crit damage and crit rate rings are actually inherently the same value. You can get the same kind of spread of stats on a crit damage or a crit rate ring. The problem is that crit rate rings are much harder to get valuable stats out of because if you have a crit rate ring, you're going to absolutely need crit damage substat. Whereas if you have a crit damage main stat, you can go with crit rate. If they have attack, precision, speed, all of those substats are good. But if you have a crit rate ring, it's really, really hard to get a lot of use out of it unless it actually has that crit damage substat, which is why you see a lot of crit damage rings over crit rate rings. But the stats are exactly the same. You get 8% rolls on substats on the crit rate, and you get 10% max rolls on the crit damage. So they're equally as good. You just need a good ring, even if it's crit rate or crit damage. And then we're going to prioritize crit rate as the first substat. I believe that getting to 100% crit rate is the highest priority thing you should go for on any damage dealer. After that, you should start focusing on your crit damage and attack. Now, this can also change if you're running them in Void Tower. I think that crit damage and attack can sometimes take a little bit higher priority over crit rate because you can run the runs a couple of times and you don't care about consistently critting every single time. Because of the runs, you could just run them over again and you don't have to multi-battle and walk away or anything like that. Speed is oftentimes a little bit better for Cyrus because you might want to use her in arena or go first or something like that. And then we have precision and HP percentage. HP percentage is actually quite nice on your damage dealers. There's a lot of PvE content where a little bit of health comes in handy. Precision could be rated a little bit higher than speed, but I find that speed is very, very important. Cyrus here has a very good base speed, but sometimes I have Cyrus, I want her to go absolutely first, even before some other characters, because she has the innate self-buffing attack. So that's quite nice on Cyrus. And then let's just go over another damage dealer here that has actually debuffs that you might want to land. 2 examples of this are going to be Urian and Evra. So we're going to prioritize the same main stats on our boots, ring, and amulet. And then we're going to go for their same substats here, crit rate, crit damage, and attack. And then you can see Urian actually have focus as the next kind of substat that you want to focus on. I think that you could either go speed or focus depending on where you're running him. But you're going to want a mix of that if you can get it after you focus on your damage. Getting him to apply the defense down is actually quite nice if you're able to get that stat while also getting the crit rate, crit damage, and attack. Now, if you're running him in arena, obviously you're just going to want speed and precision. You don't care about focus generally. But then you have someone like Evra here who kind of has an incidental defense down. It's not as important. So I think that focus is a little bit viable there, but not quite as important as Urian because she doesn't have that confirmed land on the ultimate or anything like that. Then we have another debuffer here with Tia here. She's going to want to go speed, crit rate, crit damage, or attack. And then you're going to focus that focus and then speed and then all the other good stats there. And then one last character I just want to go over is a generally just tankier character. And one good example of this could be, let's see here, we've got, well, perfect example is actually just Marion Shadowblood. She's just a standard tankier character. Well, someone you want to build tanky even though she is squishy, rather not necessarily a tankier character. And so you're just going to run the speed because it inherently works with her kit. And then you're just going to want to stack as much HP and defense as possible. And then after the fact, after you have all those stats, you're going to want to pick up your crit rate, crit damage, and attack. And the same thing could go with Brand the Brilliant here. As I put here, you have HP, defense are the priorities, and then crit rate, crit damage, and attack. And the reason for this is, once you get your characters tanky enough, crit rate, crit damage, and attack just speed up everything. And so that's more of like a luxury stat for those of you that have really, really nice gear. So there's obviously every single character on here, and you'll note that there are a lot of minute differences, you know, prioritizing one stat over another. Something like, you know, speed here is a little bit more important for Nathalia than precision due to the fact that she uses in a lot of PvE content. She needs specific speed tuning. Harbeg and Borden here are mainly attempt to use for arena, so precision tends to be more useful there. And there's all sorts of different minute intricacies to this, because I also reflect on where you would actually mainly use these characters. Some of them have very little uses, like Harbeg, and so it's kind of hard to judge that based on that. But I have gone ahead and done every single character on here except for Boo Lin, I believe. I don't think she's on here. But let me know if all this helps you out, and if you do want to check out what gear sets to use, I will go ahead and put the video to look at on the right hand side, and go ahead and click on that. You can check out what gear sets I recommend in addition to these substats for each of these characters. And that'll be it for this video, and I'll see you for the next one.